What's going on, y'all? I'm back again for a second part, right? But this one is a little different. This is a story that I've been actually this isn't the first one. This is maybe the third or fourth time I've heard this, so I decided to talk about it. Let's talk about the story everybody keeps clapping about. No, like it's brave by default. A woman leaves her marriage after 20 years to find herself, and no one is allowed to question it. No one is allowed to ask what that actually means, because if you do, you're labeled bitter, misogynistic, unsupportive, or afraid of growth. You know, no, that's not the case. I'm afraid of lies dressed up as healing. And I think we all should be, you know, because this is a thing that's going on right now. People are leaving marriages for 20 years just to find themselves, and that's the only excuse that you have is that you finding yourself. I don't even know what that actually means. Let's be honest. You didn't lose yourself in a marriage for 20 years. You chose comfort over confrontation for 20 years. You chose routine over risk, silence over honesty. You adapted, you coped, you survived. And now and now you wake up and you decide marriage is the problem. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. If you don't know who you were for 20 years, leaving the marriage doesn't magically introduce you to yourself. It just removes the mirror you've been avoiding. Finding yourself has become the prettiest excuse for not taking accountability. Let's be honest. Hey, because finding yourself sounds noble, running from your decision sounds ugly. Let's talk about the part people skip. You didn't just leave the marriage, you left shared history, inside jokes, sacrifices nobody saw, a man who aged with you, a man who probably wasn't perfect, but neither were you. And I'm not saying people should stay miserable forever by any means. I'm just saying stop pretending this is always some spiritual awakening. Like I was saying, stop pretending like this is always some spiritual awakening, because it's definitely not. We know it's not. Sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes it's resentment you never voiced. Sometimes it's comparison to culture. Sometimes it's watching the internet romanticize freedom while never showing the loneliness after the applause phase. Because here's what they don't put on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Finding yourself at the age 45, 50 looks a lot like sitting alone at night wondering why freedom feels quieter than you ever imagined. It looks like realizing the validation doesn't hit the same. It looks like discovering that independence doesn't automatically bring peace. You don't find yourself by destroying the only structure that forced you to grow. You find yourself by doing the work while it's uncomfortable, not after you burn the bridge. And let me be very clear, this isn't about gender. Men do this too. Midlife reinventions, sudden awakenings, new identities built on the ruins of old promises. But we've got to stop pretending every ending is an enlightenment. Some endings are avoidance with better marketing. Growth doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes growth is staying and telling the truth you've been swallowing for years. You know, sometimes growth is admitting you've changed, not that you were trapped. And sometimes, yes, leaving is necessary. We understand that leaving is definitely necessary. But if the explanation is you're finding yourself, you need to find yourself, then you didn't work before you left. You didn't do the work before you left. You changed the settings and called it healing. This isn't here to shame anyone. It's here to challenge the narrative. You know, because real self-discovery doesn't require audience. It doesn't need applause. You know, and it damn sure doesn't need to rewrite history to feel justified. You know, if you found yourself, own it fully. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But tell the whole truth, not just a palatable version, because freedom without accountability isn't empowerment. You know, all it is another escape. And I think a lot of people are trying to escape a reality that they don't want to be in. But then I don't think they understand what's out there. I don't think they realize that there's really nothing out there. You're gonna put yourself on the market to get passed around um, a bunch of meaningless. You know what? It makes absolutely no sense. All you're doing is lowering your value. You're not gonna find better out there. All you're gonna find is a different person with a different set of problems. And if each relationship keeps ending the same, you know, sometimes you have to take a step back and look at yourself and start taking accountability for your own actions. And you can't blame others. It's not always other people. Sometimes you have to look deeper than that. You have to look within yourself. And like I said, make sure you do the work. And running away from your problems does not make them better. Running does not make it better. It actually it makes it worse sometimes. But, you know, who am I? I'm just a guy, right? Y'all have a good night.